Thank you very much indeed, BBC News. A question really to all of you. Many of your colleagues in the Labour Party are going to feel that you have let them down. Some of them may even feel that you are betraying them by leaving where you should be sticking together. What do you say to your colleagues and to members of the Labour Party who feel that way? And secondly, do you accept that by leaving, because of the way our political system works, that makes a Tory government more likely at the next election?
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to ask Mike to respond to that.
I made this decision, and it's a very difficult decision. After a very great effort, I did stay and I did fight. And I've been fighting battles on Twitter and elsewhere, and you see the reaction I've had over recent years. There comes a point where you have to recognise this is not the Labour Party that you were in. It has changed, and it has changed at all levels. The leader, the General Secretary, the National Executive Committee, the National Constitutional Committee, and the regional organising staff they are now appointed. This is not the Labour Party that I fought to save when Neil Kinnock was leader. It isn't the Labour Party that I fought against Trotskyists in student politics. This is the Labour Party which has changed beyond recognition. And you have to make a decision. It's not just the politics. It is whether you can feel a moral integrity to go along with things that you can no longer justify or accept. And I've come to my own breaking point. I cannot do that any longer.
Thank you. To address the second part of your question, Laura, we don't think that any of the major political parties are fit for power. And in fact, we also believe that parties do not own voters. And people up and down the country are saying to us now that they feel politically homeless. We're getting this every day. We get it in our emails, when we knock on the doors. It's happening all the time. People feel politically homeless, and they are asking and begging for an alternative. This is why we believe our politics is broken, and that something has to be done to build back a politics that people believe in. And we cannot be complicit in a political system which is broken and which is failing to put the country first and put people first.
Thank you. Thanks. Paul Brand from ITV News. Two questions. Firstly, 7 MPs might be enough for a dinner party, but not necessarily enough for a significant political party. How many others have suggested to you that they might be willing to join you? And is this designed to be a new movement? And secondly, instinctively, how do you think you are likely to vote in Parliament? Could you potentially vote with the Conservative Party on a case-by-case basis? And would you be willing to vote for the withdrawal agreement if it prevented no deal?
Gavin.
I mean, let me just pick up on the first point. Everyone's had a crack at the story, the Da Vinci Code of how many and who and what's happened. And there's a really obvious reason for that. Look, we're politicians and also human beings. We have conversations with each other all the time. And you will know from your reporting that if you talk to colleagues that aren't here today, their assessment of the situation in the Labour Party is remarkably similar to us. It is an incredibly hard judgment to come out and to make this stance today. There will be some who will see this today and will be agonising about what to do because they agree with our analysis, but it's hard to do something new. It's really hard. So look, absolutely, we might have a great dinner party with 7. I'm confident, however, that the arguments we're making, the recognition that neither of these parties are any longer fit for government, must impress on our colleagues the choice. And the choice for Labour colleagues is whether they're willing to go out and defend electing a Labour government with its views on anti-Semitism, national security, and its enabling of a hard Tory Brexit.
Chuka, do you want to come on?
Just on the point that you raised, Paul, about, you know, a new movement, what have you. Look, the usual way that things are often done in Westminster is a little bit, you know, you have a podium, someone goes up and tells you how it's going to be. We're clear that there needs to be an alternative. People cannot be saddled with this appalling choice of incompetence, frankly. But the idea that you can kind of cook this up in Westminster is not the way that I think people want things to be done. So we want to invite all those, that there are millions of people who are watching what we're doing today, we believe, who feel politically homeless. But we need to get everybody involved in working out what the alternative should look like, its form, its structure. And so we're not being dishonest. Look, we think there needs to be an alternative. But for us to stand up, pontificate, declare a manifesto and all that at this stage on day one of us having just left a political party, I think would be getting a bit beyond where we need to be today.
Just on how you'd vote, sorry, instinctively, how do you think you
would
vote?
On that, look,
vote with the government?
we've put out our values. You will see on our wonderful new website, theindependent.group. If I haven't got that right, Luciana will discipline me. But visit our website. You will see our list of values, who we are, what we believe, because that's where this comes from. It's about who we are, and you've heard a bit, we deliberately have told you a bit of a story about ourselves as people, because if politics isn't people, it's nothing, right? So we will decide on how we will vote on different things according to our values, and we are independent, by the way, so it might be that we have different views on different things, but the consistent point, the meeting point is our values, and like we said, it's not just Labour people who would necessarily subscribe to that, people from other political traditions. And make no mistake, it's not just Labour MPs who are privately wrestling with their consciences on this every single day. We know of lots of other members of Parliament in other parties too. The whole thing is broken, so we've got to change it.
Tom Rayner from Sky News. Would you now be prepared to fight by-elections, either by triggering them yourself or if they are brought about by constituents that are unhappy? And secondly, if you could explain why now? Was there a moment, a particular trigger for deciding to make this announcement today?
Ask Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way those two parts are answered by the same thing. I mean, we are at a time of massive national upheaval and crisis, and elections, general election, by-elections are absolutely not what is needed right now. We were elected in 2017. In our constitution, you don't just vote for a delegate with a particular party colour, you vote for an individual. And we feel that it's a fundamental principle in our parliamentary system that we use our judgment and our integrity to guide how we react to different events and circumstances. So, of course, for myself, the Brexit saga has been very much a tipping point. You know, I've been trying for a very, very long time to push and cajole and nudge the Labour Party to do what I would regard as its traditional values to point it towards, which is protecting jobs and livelihoods. But instead, we've seen a consistent attempt to put sort of political calculations above what I regard as the national interest. And that, for me, has been a tipping point. But there's a combination of issues, as you've heard today.
So there's one more at the front, then I'm going to come over to this side.
Thanks. Thank you. Andy Bell, 5 News. What do you say to those that you've basically just jumped before you're about to be pushed, that you had no place in the Labour Party and you weren't prepared to fight any more to try and change policy on a whole range of fronts? You could have stayed, you could have fought, but you've just given up.
I'll take that question, thank you. I don't think anyone can accuse any of us sat here on this platform of not speaking out and challenging what we see to be wrong and standing up for those values that we've all set out this morning. It's not easy always to speak out, particularly when, as many of us have alluded to, there is a culture which seeks to suppress that speaking out. And I certainly, when I joined the Labour Party, thought I was joining a broad church. And it's now clear that that broad church, which brought many of us into the Labour Party, no longer exists. And therefore, we have to be true to ourselves and true to our values. And it would be much easier for us if we just kept quiet and kept our heads down. But we don't believe, or I certainly don't believe, that's what I came into politics to do. We came into politics to make a change, make a difference for the communities that we are privileged to elect to represent, and to also make a change for this country. And the status quo and carrying on as normal, in my view, is just not acceptable. Gary.
Behind you.
Oh, thanks. Gary Gibbon, Channel 4 News. An awful lot of echoes here with the launch of the SDP and the words that they kicked off with in their declaration. Have you learnt any lessons from what happened to them? And why aren't you launching a centre party today? Is it because you haven't had any Tories turn up yet?
Thank you. I'll ask Angela to come back on that.
Thank you, Gary. Look, I just don't think the comparison with the SDP stands up to scrutiny. This is it's a different century, and the challenges that the country faces are on a scale that I don't think we've seen at any other time in the post-war period. I said earlier that voters feel politically homeless, but they also feel very badly let down by the main political parties, all the political parties, and they do not feel adequately represented at Westminster. The feeling out there, I think, is that the Labour Party has clearly shifted to the hard left, but equally, we now see the Tory Party lurching to the hard right. And the Lib Dems lost the trust of voters years ago, as we all know. So we're now in a position where I think we feel a responsibility to break away from all of that and to play our part in rebuilding trust in politics by building a movement around our values so that we can create the change to build a better future. Now, in terms of not starting as a new party, I think that what we want to do is sit as a group of independent MPs and make the appeal to the people, as Chuka did earlier, to give people out there the chance to tell us what they want to see in a new, sensible, centre-ground political movement. It's not for us to determine what that party or what any future political movement should look like. We want to hear what people have got to say.
Thank you. Theo.
Is it the case that your group has something of a shelf life to the next election? Because apart from you, Angela, you're all sitting on quite large Labour majorities. So do you feel the pressure of time to make your point in the next coming months, perhaps until 2022? And would you coordinate with the Liberal Democrats? And thirdly, have you got a leader? And if so, who's it going to be?
Okay, so as Chuka set out earlier on, we're going to have our first formal meeting as an independent group of MPs in a few days' time, and that's the point where we'll start talking together about assigning roles and responsibilities and so forth. And at this stage, one step at a time, we've left the Labour Party today. It's a pretty big step for a lot of us to make, but we want to talk to our colleagues in Parliament. We want to talk to members of the Labour Party who, as we know, are already resigning in their thousands and have been for quite a while. So what was the first part of your question was? Do you feel the pressure of time? Well, I think I would say we've resigned for our integrity, but we haven't just left the Labour Party for our own personal gratification. We feel quite a strong sense of duty to the country at large. We could resign and walk away and do something else, as others have, but we believe to leave the people of this country without an option, essentially facing a choice between Corbynism or Europhobia, that's just not right. It's not the right thing to do. So, yeah, it may be. We'll see what happens, and there's a very healthy dose of British scepticism, quite right too, about all of these things. I entirely understand that. But the thing is, to those people who say, nothing ever changes, this is it, well, until you give it a try, you'll never really know.
Nick at the back. Oh,
okay.
Can I just add something else? Thanks, Angela, to Theo's question. Let's be absolutely clear. You can't change the status quo if you're going to, if you like, rejoin it. So there are going to be no mergers. We are not going to go and join the Liberal Democrats. Let's be absolutely clear about that. We are saying there needs to be a new offer and a new alternative. And if there are other members of Parliament, regardless of their political party in the House of Commons, who identify with and share our values, we're inviting all of them to go independent and join our independent group. But this has to genuinely be something new, because the status quo is unbelievably broken. Everybody can see that.
Thank you. Nick.
I'm just picking up on what Gary Gibbons said. Sorry, I should say Nick Watt, BBC Newsnight. This is obviously a profoundly difficult moment for the seven of you. But the Gang of Seven don't look like the Gang of Four, who electrified British politics when they set up the SDP in 1981. And the reason why they did that was they had huge support in the Labour movement and huge support elsewhere. You have huge support in the Labour movement, but then they all say, not now, stay on board, fight from within. And is there, therefore, in the light of that, not a danger that you're just going to be a protest group? And we know what protest groups on the centre-left do. They sustain Conservatives in power.
Well, look, if you look at this group that are in front of you, you've got diversity from across the country, diversity in background. You heard some of the stories that are there. In other words, we're trying to do something right for our age, not for the 20th century. Now, I'll try not to take too much offence at the respective judgment of whether or not we match up to the Gang of Four. It's not something that we numerically or otherwise would want to try and line up to. But let me just put this to you. You suggested to me, Nick, that actually in the Labour movement, people kind of share our assessment, but they say, not yet, hold back, hold on, one more heave, something will turn up. Something is not going to turn up. And the bottom line is this. We don't come out here and say, look at our talents, abilities, oratory. We say, look at our judgment and look at our integrity in taking what is an incredibly hard decision today. I would take that any day over a comparison with a group of people from before.
I'll take some hands over here.
Microphone.
Hi, Adam Payne from Business Insider. I'm just wondering if some of you can explain how what you've done today, and particularly the timing of it, makes another referendum, stopping Brexit, or even just softening Brexit more likely.
Well, let's be... where's Adam? Sorry. Hi, it's a bit crowded in here. Look, we're absolutely clear where we stand on Brexit. This is a national catastrophe, and we want no part in facilitating the disaster if it happens. But what we are doing today is completely separate from the campaign organisation, which is the People's Vote, which we all wholeheartedly support. And in the end, we're not going to change the arithmetic in the House of Commons on what happens with Brexit and whether the people are given the final say on this. Ultimately, it will be the overall number of MPs in the House of Commons that will determine that. Funnily enough, actually, I do wonder whether what we've done today may actually encourage the Labour Party to do the right thing. But we're clear we've exhausted our ability to persuade the party to do the right thing. And I don't think anybody could accuse us of having sat on our hands from the beginning of this Parliament when, I put down an amendment to the Queen's speech just to provide for us to be part of the single market and the customs union, never mind the people's vote. It has been like getting blood from a stone to get the Labour Party to do the right thing by our constituents on this issue.
Thank you. Take one at the front and then I'm going to do two at the back. Put the microphone over here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sean Dilley, BBC News at Westminster. Luciana specifically, but a brief comment from everybody if you can. You have suggested, you have suggested that the party is institutionally anti-Semitic, which is quite a serious charge, and you've also said that the leadership has failed to tackle it. Are you suggesting that Jeremy Corbyn is anti-Semitic?
I can only reflect on what has happened over the course of the 11 months, and I've come to the conclusion I have because every single step, despite, and again, I come back to the remarks I made earlier, we had the unprecedented event of a minority community in our country taking to Parliament Square to demonstrate, not against National Action or a far-right organisation, but to demonstrate against Her Majesty's opposition. And in the wake of that, you would anticipate that an organisation and party that's supposed to pride itself on one of the core values of equality for all and anti-racism, that led many people to join the party in the first place, would want to do everything possible to mitigate it. And yet, if we look at what's happened over the course of now the past 11 months, at every single step of the way, whether it's us having to fight to get the international definition of anti-Semitism, with all of its examples incorporated into Labour Party policy, whether it was the fact that most recently, and again we can capture what's happened in the intervening period, the Parliamentary Labour Party passed a motion unanimously calling on the leadership to declare and be open about what's happened. And yet we've seen an obfuscation, we've seen figures that have been fudged, and you only have to look at the events of the last few weeks to hear and see how bad the situation really is. There's many different examples that have been surfaced in the press, many that haven't. And on that basis, I don't come to that conclusion lightly. I've spoken up every single step of the way, joined with many colleagues. I'm very proudly the parliamentary chair and have been of the Jewish labour movement, but there has to come a point where, having stood outside Parliament as I did with the Jewish community, side by side, saying enough is enough. Enough really has to mean enough, and that's why I've taken this decision today.
Look, I think it's for Jeremy. We have our views. I think we've made them clear. I think it's for Jeremy Corbyn to answer that question. But I just want to say something. As a member of, well, as a baptised member of the Low Church Christian community, I think it's incumbent on everyone to acknowledge the problem with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And we, all on this platform, stand side by side with Luciana and the Jewish community. It is not acceptable. It is absolutely sickening to see the abuse that has been piled on our Jewish colleagues in the Labour Party. And it is one of the principal reasons for our departure. We cannot stand to one side, whoever we are, whatever our religion, and see this happen within one of our major political parties. That's one of the major reasons for our departure. And we will not desert those in our community who stand under and suffer such abuse. We won't do it. We will never, ever do that, ever.
Thank you. I'm going to take 3 hands at the back, Francis, and then I don't know the microphone.
Hi, Francis Elliott, The Times. A couple of practical questions. Is there an independent group in the Lords? Will you apply for short money to develop policies? Will you declare your donations? And if people, kind of ordinary members, want to join you, they don't seem to be able to join anything. So how can they join and what will they do?
Thank you, Gavin.
There isn't an independent group in the Lords. I think we've got the room till the afternoon. So if something does happen, stick around. You mentioned around short money, it's day one. We haven't approached that conversation. There's obviously a bit of tidying up to do. Just on the issue of donations, because it is important. Look, Chuka laid out before, we don't have the infrastructure, the big money. We hired a way too small room and underwrote it ourselves. And we built a website. What happens now will be determined by those that come forward and support us. This is our commitment, though. We'll abide by any of the requirements placed on us legally, and we'll publish any large donors that give to us. But I would encourage people to go to the website where they can make smaller donations. This really is it, guys. If you want to build something new, if you agree with our values, if you think that you feel as politically homeless as us, this is the moment to try and build it. So I direct people there.
Can you pass the microphone back? Can you pass the microphone back? There's, oh, it's done. It's 2. And then Hannah next.
Hello, good morning. Michael Settle from the Herald. Isn't the biggest cheer this morning going to come from the likes of Theresa May and Nicola Sturgeon at what you've just done? And you spoke earlier on about the diversity of this group. So are you disappointed that there are no Scottish members of it?
Can I take that question?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think, as I said earlier, we believe that the entire political system is now broken, and that actually we can see, the evidence is quite clear for us all to see, that there is no real, the confidence in the political system, whether it's in the Tories, in the Lib Dems or in Labour, is dwindling by the day. I've never known a period in my adult life when it's felt as though not one political party is fit for power. This is very, very different from the early 80s, and so that's why we think it's incumbent on us, morally and politically, to build an alternative. And we've had enough evidence to suggest that people out there will come forward, register their support and help us from this point onwards build a new political movement. As far as the Scots are concerned, we will be speaking to colleagues. We have been speaking to colleagues. We'll continue to speak to colleagues. And we sincerely hope that more of our colleagues will come on board at a later point.
I'll take the last question. It's from Hannah.
I think Angela's just touched on my question. It's Hannah Lothman from BuzzFeed News. My question was basically, you mentioned other colleagues from other parties thinking about potentially joining you. Are you going to be having those conversations to actively try to recruit them, or are you going to hope that they arrive at that decision themselves?
I'll hand over to Anne.
Thank you very much. I'm hidden behind this chair. We continually have conversations with people and trying to be quite open about what we think and where we think we're going. So, of course, we're hoping to recruit people from other parties. Because one of the things I particularly feel strongly about is you will see over Brexit that the party system has actually broken down. There's MPs working in a cross-party way over particular issues. The whipping system has broken down. And the reason for that is that both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are a particular coalition within their own parties. They were broad churches. And I think that what we're saying is, given that fragmentation, that's a very good opportunity and a very good moment for people to join yet another group that perhaps reflects better what they think than the political party they are an existing member of.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that we are out of time at this moment. I'm going to draw things to a close. But for those members of the press that are here today, some of my colleagues and I will be available for interview and further question immediately after this event. We're going to make available packs of our Statement of Independence with contact details and other information which will be available from the team. There will also be people around to answer any questions that you may have. So if I can thank you all for coming to join us this morning, and to my colleagues, thank you very much. Thank you.